Hey guys, how's it going? KRIPP'S here. Today we're going to do the Diablo IV class review. Some of you guys have really been waiting for my opinion on this. I have just finished playing the two classes they added in the second round of beta, and this is basically all we're going to get until the game actually releases a couple of months from now. It is a low-level experience, but there is a lot to be learned even from a low-level experience, and I will mention the changes that I expect the classes to experience on a case-by-case basis as they level up in terms of what probably will happen, because we can see the skill tree and we have rumors from the Vine of players that have maybe played and all that. Now, before we get into it, a quick shout out here to XtraFi. So XtraFi is one of my partners. We have the KRIPP mouse. Look at that. Appropriately themed for Diablo 4, I would say. It is my favorite mouse in the world, the XtraFi M4. We made it red, redesigned the outside of it, just the color scheme, but it's exactly as I wanted. It is my favorite mouse in the world. It is the KRIPP'S mousepad, the XtraFi K4 midsize, that's my favorite keyboard, and an H2 headset, and you can win it by entering the giveaway. It ends end of day Sunday, which is going to be the 26th, end of day on the 26th. So make sure you get in on that. Link is below. It's a Gleam giveaway, super easy to enter. On to the content. We're going to kick it off with what I consider the worst overall class to the best. We have Druid. So Druid, and again, I am comparing near 25 with just found gear. So I know I've been playing like a level 25 Sork and a few others for a while after. No, I re-leveled some of those. This is the gear that you can expect to have while you're leveling. Honestly, it's probably a little bit better than you can expect to have, because in the beta there is a roughly 3 times multiplier on dropped legendaries. So these characters, this is not like farming the one level 35 mob for like 20 hours to get gear that's essentially like level 40 gear. No, none of that, okay? This is what you can expect to have as a true leveling experience in terms of gear, and no specific legendaries other than maybe a few that I find, and I'll outline how that worked out. So Druid. Druid works pretty simply. You have spirit generators and you have spirit spenders. There are many classes of skills. There are like lightning melee, lightning ranged, melee, which is like the werewolf transform, and melee, that's the werebear transform, and you just transform for the attack individually is how it works. The skills are themed appropriately. For the basic skills, there's no real standout. They're all okay. I think maybe Storm Spike is among the better ones, because you have Immobilize and Vulnerable that can proc, which is pretty nice. Pulverize is an interesting skill, because every 10 seconds, if you remain over 80 health, it guaranteed overpowers, and overpowers a lot of damage. So basically, this type of Pulverize build, kind of like melee, it's pretty good if you're doing like a questing, because every 10 seconds this ability will actually do a ton of damage. Otherwise, I've found that Landslide is probably the best way to spend your spirit. The Cyclone Armor's pretty good, Blood Hell's pretty good. They have minions, but they don't really shine. You might be able to stack it because there's some legendary powers. And you have Trample as a movement skill. And I'll just give you guys a little bit of a demo here. Overall, I'm going to rank these classes out of 10. This is just a dungeon I like in particular. Druid is the lowest damage class in Diablo 4. I would rank it a 4 out of 10 damage. So we can use like a movement skill, but you notice it actually takes a little bit to cast. So we're going to guaranteed overpower. That's the big slap. So we want to heal, but that actually takes a second, you know? We want to punt away with Cyclone Armor. That takes a second. With Druid, the tools are there, but they're all pretty low damage in the beta, and they're all really slow. And while I do think that the druid will have pretty good damage later on, just because you're able to get some pretty powerful combos. You won't have to use spirit generators as much. Your spirit always stays the same. It doesn't go up, it doesn't go down. It's not too bad. Oh, Conduit Shrine, that's nice. But the slap while questing, I think, makes it a playable character, even though the damage is like really low. You can see here, this is not good damage. It's like okay just from those overpower guarantees, but that's it. Very poor damage, very slow. I think the damage will pick up, but you're always going to have a bit of a clunky character, so keep that in mind. The survival, I would say, is 6 out of 10. There are survival skills. There is easy ways to fortify. The werebear has some tanky options. There are survivability options, but in the beta, they are, again, not really fully realized. Next up, that's right, it's gonna be Barbarian. Barbarian I rank as the second worst, or, you know, placing 4th out of 5 if you want to look at it. There is some good news with Barbarian, though, and that is that players have exhaustively played the Barbarian to a point where there are actually pretty good damage builds with Barbarian. The Barbarian, I would say, is a 7 out of 10 damage. The damage is actually respectable, very playable. Okay, very playable damage. How do we achieve that? Well, we go with Flay because bleed is pretty good and you get some extra thorns. Rend is actually a decent skill, but it's a damage over time, so you kind of have to survive in the meantime. It can keep up vulnerable, which is pretty nice. The war cries are all pretty good because they have powerful synergies if you use all of them, so we're just going to use all of them. And it turns out Thorns is actually pretty good. I wouldn't go all in on a Thorns, I wouldn't go all in on a bleed, but you know what? If you put it all together, it's like okay. Yes, we have realized okay damage. Bleed plus Thorns plus War Cries, and War Cries have the added benefit that I think they apply to, because I think they're minions that call the Ancients. This is the triple elite pack. This is like a no joke, but you're gonna start seeing the survivability isn't so good. I would rank Barb as the lowest survivability, and this is kind of a misconception, I think, because in previous titles, Barbarians was actually one of the tankiest, if not the tankiest characters. In Diablo IV, even though there are some tools to keep you alive, some survivability options, I think they are below every other class in the game. And because you can't really gain much from closing the gap, you're always going to have that really forced melee playstyle. Even though it's pretty much a consensus that the damage should be pretty good later on. I expect Barbarian to be one of the top damage, if not the top damage, in terms of standing in front of your target and target dummying the damage. In terms of that damage, I think Barb is likely to be top or very near the top. You just never escape the forced melee, which always brings your survivability into question, and the tools are just not sufficient. You know, challenging shout and a little bit of regen from it. You have some bare bone fortify options. There's like some movement skills like leap, but it's a 17-second cooldown, and the bar slots are really important for Barbarians, so it really doesn't do too well. The forced melee is really a problem, and for those Barbarian players that are expecting high survivability, this is not the class for you. If you want to play a barbaric, melee, gritty combat character that actually resembles the Barbarians in previous games, you're going to want to play the melee rogue. The melee rogue is about the same damage as Barbarian, but the survivability is pretty good. So rogues have the option of playing melee or range. These are actually the ranged abilities in both their generators and their spenders for energy. Now, their generators hardly generate very much. They mostly focus off regeneration. So we can do like the flurry here. This is my skill of choice, and it's my skill of choice because it's a very high sustained skill. Where is it here? There it is. Each time Flurry damages a croucher or vulnerable enemy, you are healed for 1% of your maximum life. And Flurry itself, I believe it's here, cascades the vulnerable effect. So what you do is you proc vulnerable with puncture if they get hit for at least 2 of the blades. That's pretty easy to do. You then cascade the vulnerable with Flurry, and Flurry heals you a whole bunch. Rogues excel in burst through the effect of imbuements, which imbues the entire skill. So every hit gets this effect. You have the poison, the shadow, the frost. You can use a combination of them. The shadow clone is just 60% more damage for 15 seconds, but it's more than that because you can usually concentrate and use all of your cooldowns at once. The burst is there. The mobility, like, look how good the mobility is. That's a huge coverage, and Dash has 2 charges and does pretty good damage, I would say. So overall, the Rogue, I think, matches the Barbarian in damage potential, at least in the beta. I would rank it 7 out of 10 damage. It easily surpasses the Barbarian in terms of survivability just through this significant regeneration that it can have. It's also a really fast character, which, I mean, you can just tell it's just really fast. It's brutally fast. So being a really fast character, it allows you to basically outplay situations. It's for those min-maxers, those high APM players. You're probably going to at least look at the Rogue as one of the options. Now, unlike Barbarian, I don't expect the Rogue's damage to go up that much later, but it's pretty good already. But one thing that I really like with Rogue, I don't know if I have it here. No, it's in the core skills. Yes, here it is. Heal for 1% of your maximum life when you critically strike close enemies. So for melee gameplay in Rogue, in the beta, it's actually really hard to get much crit, but I imagine at high level, you'll be able to target focus crit. And I think with this ability, I don't think it has, like, passives don't tend to have cooldowns in Diablo 4. So I imagine that a high-level rogue actually has much higher survivability. A high-level rogue might be one of the best survivability classes. Maybe. We'll see. You know, with those type of stats, you typically need crit to work for your damage as well. I imagine it does, right? But, you know, I don't know 100%. But overall, I'm feeling pretty confident about it. I think it is a good choice. Necromancer. So we played Necromancer today. Necromancer does a ton of damage. Just out of the gate, I will tell you that Necromancer, in my opinion, is a 10 out of 10 damage class. Again, we're talking about target dummy here. Like, mob is here, we do damage. We have skeletons. You have this, like, Book of the Dead thing where you can either use one of 3 different versions of skeleton mages, golems, and melee skeletons, or you can not use them and gain a passive effect. So in the case of skeleton mages, I'm not using them to deal 15 increased damage to vulnerable enemies. Is that worth it? I don't know. Maybe. The skeleton mages are pretty good. The skeleton warriors are pretty good. I'm actually running a very specific build with this character because I happen to find Blood Mist triggers corpse explosion on surrounding corpses when Blood Mist detonates a corpse. So that probably sounds like alien stuff to you, but basically, Necros have no movement skills, but they have this Blood Mist skill where they run slower, and if you put a point into it, it can spawn a corpse under it each second. Now, with this ability, it constantly triggers Corpse Explosion, the actual skill that you have, and each time it does that, it reduces the cooldown of it. So this particular build is pretty high damage, and it's almost near full invulnerability uptime. I imagine this will be pretty nerfed, but the real reason why I give Necro 10 out of 10 damage is Bone Splinters. Actually, okay, Bone Spear is also a really good skill, and Bone Spirit uses all your spirit and like has a massive damage multiplier. That's a really good skill. There's just some really good skills, but the one skill that I think is creme de la creme here is Bone Splinters. So Bone Splinters, just use it here real quick. It's just like a few little darts basically. Sometimes it shoots 3, sometimes it shoots 5. I think it's like 33% chance to shoot 5, so 1 in 3. It's not too bad. But if something is even pretty close to melee, all of them will hit. So it is a pure shotgun ability that is really, really nice. The lucky hit chance, considering that you're hitting 3 to 5 times per cast, is very decent. Remember, this is a level 2. At max, if you count the extra splinters, you're likely to get 30% chance. You are probably going to look at a skill that's about 140 average damage. You can get near guaranteed vulnerability because it's very easy to hit with 2, or you can get a passive crit buff. Now, crit is pretty good, and with bone skills, you can actually get a build where you stack essence and you get massive flat crit chance for just not really using many spenders. And this is insane because the basic skill is, in my opinion, and I think it's pretty clear cut, I think it's the best basic skill in the game. So you can just spam off of that. I think you can make a character purely off of basic skill. And just so we're clear, there are some massive basic skill multipliers. There's gems and weapons, I believe it's yellow gems, that are multipliers to basic skill damage. There is a legendary ability that is like 70% attack speed with basic skills. So the game just has, and I think there's just a stat that is, like 22% basic skill damage. So basic skill damage is like super common to skill. The problem is most characters don't have a good basic skill. But the Necro, it easily has the best one. And I have to imagine that Blizzard's not going to create such a massive scaling part of the game and not have any decent basic skills for anyone. The Necros is really a big standout, and I'll just show you here. So this is no bone skills. Like, I have none of those like crazy passives with crit. Look at that, I'm just one-shotting these mobs in melee range. This is an insane ability. Right? Now, it is pretty annoying to have to run into melee and use like a shotgun ability, but I think from a pure number standpoint, it's very good. We also see the minions doing a pretty good job at doing a little bit of extra damage, and of course tanking. If you're curious, oh, I kind of stood still there, that was kind of weird. We have Cursing, which offers a powerful survivability boost, and the minions tend to just also take a few hits. But if you're noticing, the minions are also kind of dying a lot. Actually, I can't move with that. What is that about? Anyway, you get the idea. Necros are pretty cool. Why can't I move with that? That's actually pretty weird. Might actually be bugged or something. I'm not able to move when I have Blood Mist active, but normally you can, and it auto-spawns the detonates, which is pretty good. But yes, so right now I have the Decrepify Curse, which is a slow 40% and 20% less damage. So that is a very big effect. No, we got it. I'll just misclick. And yeah, it's pretty good. I think there might be some options for minion-based builds, but I would say they would be slim at endgame. I don't have the melee buffs. Like, you can get 45% increased life on your skeleton warriors. Also, your minions get your stats, but we're playing on the second difficulty of 4 difficulty levels, and if 45 health is the difference, and these are just dying a lot, yeah, I don't think that end game you're going to look towards full minion builds. Maybe, but you're going to have to spend a lot of your time in minion maintenance. Even with this build, you have to spend some time in minion maintenance. Now, while Necros have the best basic skill in the game, very powerful core skills, very powerful AoE skills, powerful legendary combos, and curses, numbers-wise, they're great. Very high damage, take less damage. However, one thing they don't have at all is a movement skill. And I really need to factor that in when considering the overall survival. Because survival is not just taking less damage, and certainly Necros take a little bit less damage than, the baseline 100%. They still have some tools with the minions. Now, the minions are going to die if you have like 2 or 3 rares, or if you find a butcher or any like really hard boss, and it can be really annoying because you need a corpse to summon one of them, right? I would put the Necros survival at 5. Just because of a no movement skill, it is going to be really tough to not get pinned down, surrounded, and killed. And I know we have like a near full invulnerability build right now with the Blood Mist weapon affix. I think the damage of this is pretty good, but I think Blizzard is not going to look kindly upon a full invulnerability build, so I wouldn't count on that making it through. But because Necro has so many powerful offensive options, I think that Necro will still likely be king of damage until you get to like the end game, and you're looking at, you know, the super stacking abilities, min-maxing gear, at which point I'm expecting the Barbarian to pull ahead of the other classes. At least I hope so, because otherwise Barbarian is going to be completely hopeless at everything. So that's 4 out of 5 classes. Obviously, I think Sorc is the #1 class, but how do I rank it in numbers? So the Sorcerer has pretty decent basic abilities, but it doesn't really need to use them because the resource system just regenerates pretty quickly. Like, if you look at it, that's that regeneration rate is about as much as you can get Fury on a Barbarian constantly using generators. Okay, the Sorc just gets it. Yeah. We have powerful conjuration abilities that don't do a lot of damage per hit, but they stay up and continuously do damage. Damage-wise, the Sorcerer is very powerful. The teleport skill is the best movement skill in the game. It has the longest distance. It can go through walls. It can be used anytime because it gives you unstoppable, so you can use it while you're CC'd to break CC. And if you level the ability, it actually lowers the cooldown by about 0.5 seconds. Now, I was able to get a level 8 Hydra on the Sorc that I was decking out, and I imagine you can get skills much further than that. So if we're looking at like a level 10 teleport with some cooldown reduction, I think you're looking at about a 5-second or so teleport endgame. And you can get this rune then. After teleporting, you gain 30% damage reduction for 5 seconds, which is ridiculous. I also mentioned in the How Good is Diablo 4 video the barrier stacking with Align the Elements. Align the Elements reduces the damage you take from elites, bosses, and players by half. And if you never take health damage, if you're constantly cycling barriers, it never drops when you're hit. So the survivability tools and the fact that the Sorcerer has many incredibly powerful defensive tools on top of the cycled barriers, I would rank the Sorc as a 10 out of 10 survival. I think the Sorcerer, even though it sounds a little bit counter-theming, and the theming is actually very good for the class of Diablo 4, even though it sounds a little bit counterintuitive for the theming of these roles traditionally in like role-play games, yeah, the Sorcerer's got it. You know, 4 to 6 second immunity, freeze everything, constant freeze, constant chills, constant barriers, multiple immunities, multiple CC breaks, the best passive damage reduction. Barriers are not just extra health. They're temporary, but because you're putting them up repeatedly, they actually function as a form of regeneration. Because it's not like your health goes up by 30% and then you take damage and you have to heal it back up. No, the barrier just absorbs all the damage, then you get another barrier. This is actually a form of regeneration, so the Sorcerer is also the highest sustained character in the game. It's possible that Rogue will overcome it when it comes to like end game, and I mentioned kind of the crit scaling of regeneration. Damage-wise, I think the Sorc is a 9 out of 10. I think that Necro seems to have higher target dummy-based DPS. Like if you stand in front of your target and you're just spamming the skills single target, I think the Necro does, at least right now, outscale the Sorc. But the Sorc doesn't really play that kind of game. You know, you teleport a screen away. The Necro doesn't even have a movement skill. You know, I did one cast and that Hydra cleared everything, right? So here we can just go immune. And again, this is a freshly leveled 25. It actually only took me 2.5 hours to level to 25. So the damage, it's not 10 out of 10. It's not 10 out of 10. But the ease of use, the fact that you absolutely murder trash mobs, the fact that you have ridiculous survivability, the best movement skill in the game, and the dynamic playstyle of the enchantment system that you can change up in combat, right? In combat, it is ridiculous. It's a super dynamic playstyle. It is the most versatile, the most mobile class in the game. And the reason why I am pretty certain I'm going to be playing a sorcerer on launch, it's the fastest character clearing these dungeons. There's just no ifs and or like this. Just it just is. It is that. Yes, you might lose out to damage to like a necromancer or maybe burst to a barbarian, but in terms of how long it takes to actually clear a dungeon, Sorc is the best. In terms of real effectiveness, Sorc is actually just the best right now. Very fast, dynamic playstyle, the best survivability. I'm going Sorc. Hope this video has been informative, and I await more Diablo content. Hopefully you do as well. Thanks for watching.